Alright everybody, Larry Vela here, and I'm back with Stable Abe.
Howdy.
And here we are. We have Flames of War 4th edition, brand new edition. It's been a few years since 3rd came out, and definitely I'd say Abe, a lot of big changes.
A lot of big changes, a lot of I would say trimming, streamlining. It's much more of a modern game.
Yes. We're going to be going over these books today. So this is the core rules for 1942-1943 mid-war,
which has really been where the game has lived and been most popular most of the time.
And then we have these two add-on books that we're also going to be talking about today. And these are the add-on books that give you more core rules and faction rules that let you play in early war, 39 through 41, and late war. So between all of these, this is the core game and all the faction rules for Flames of War version 4 across all of World War II, early, mid, and late war. So we're going to put these aside for now, and we'll get back to them in a little bit. Let's talk about the actual book. So what's the first thing we're going to notice about this book, Abe?
Well, it's much smaller and lighter.
Is, as you can see, it's pretty skinny. In fact, let's talk really quickly just on a physical point of view. Here's the origin. Here is third edition. Third edition. Yeah. And I want you to take a look at this. 3rd edition, 4th edition.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much, I mean, there's games that get a little bit of trimming from edition to edition. This game has had a rules shearing. It is substantially smaller and cleaned up.
And in both books, just to point out, those are all rules. There's no army lists or anything that's been cut out.
Correct.
There are some parts of the 3rd edition book that have been cut out of this book and that you can find in the supplemental books. The 3rd edition book contained a lot of rules for fortifications and some of that stuff. That's not really in this book. That's in the add-on books.
The 3rd edition book, as an example, 294 pages.
This is 116, I think.
Yeah, this book is, let's flip really quick. Yep, 118 pages.
Yeah.
Counting the back. So less than half the size.
Less than half the size. And if you look through the table of contents, you can just see that some of the trimming in the previous book. For instance, the assault rules took about 30 pages to cover, 29 pages. They're about 8 pages in this book. Right.
So just way substantial.
Yeah.
So let's get down to it. First of all, some of you are going to say, have I seen this before? And the answer is yes and no.
Yeah.
In quote-unquote Flames of War, you have not seen this before, but this is heavily inspired by the changes that Battlefront pioneered in Team Yankee,
which is their Cold War,
which is their
gone hot kind of.
Exactly. That's their that's their alternative history, World War III, set in the 80s. So it's Warsaw Pact versus NATO, and that game basically was a test run for the core of these rules. It's not identical, but you know, a lot of it was the, can we make this game system work with less than half the pages? And the answer was clearly yes.
Yeah, and that really got started with the Vietnam game they released.
Yeah, that had like kind of a little.
There was a little quick Vietnam game that was released back in Flames of War 2nd edition.
It was way back.
That grew into modern Team Yankee. Also, you've seen a lot of this because they are going to reuse a lot of art and maps and stuff that was in the old book. So this is still very recognizably the same Flames of War stuff that you've seen before.
And the game still functions. While it is substantially cleaner, it's not like it has an entirely different turn. All the phases, the same phases that you know are there. They're in the same order. It's just that a lot of the, as an example, you know, when you were in Assault before, there was 30 pages of all these weird little fiddly cases and lots of examples. And what happens if, you know, what happens if this guy charges and then this other guy's in the way, and then you know, then you have these weird types of tanks, and there was, you know, it just went on. Whereas this one is definitely, look, this is the way it works.
This is the way it works.
Like the assault phase is like these 6 phases, and you just go through and boom, 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 boom.
Right.
So,
the other big, I would say probably the biggest change, is single change, is unit cards, though. Right. Because all the units are now represented by a card rather than just a stat block,
which is kind of cool.
And that's
definitely makes it easier to kind of keep track of them and play on the tabletop.
On the table, yeah.
On the tabletop. So let's go through this. Obviously, we're not going to show you every page, but we want to give you a general feel for it. Here's the table of contents. So we have your basics and background of you know, and what is World War II. There are Yes, there are people who don't know what World War II is. That's about 10 pages. Basics on the game, how cards work, how terrain works, turn sequence. So you're getting just really kind of core basics of like what is this game and how does it work up to about page 40. Remember, this entire book is 120 pages, so that's a third of it. It's just kind of getting you into what this game is and basic mechanics. How do you roll dice? What's the turn sequence look like? And then you hit the actual rules. The actual rules start on page 40, and then you're pretty much done with like the rules. By the time you reach Armies of the World, which is where you're starting to talk about factions and missions and things. So really, you're going from page 40 to page 80. So the core rules for Flames of War at this point are 40 pages long.
Right.
I mean, just tremendously, just a huge amount of cutting. And I think we've talked about this with other game systems. I mean, this is the way of the future.
Absolutely.
You know, ladies and gentlemen, this is the way. This isn't, you know, a Battlefront thing. This is everyone in the industry is moving in this direction.
I mean, look at most of the Fantasy Flight games are probably, when you combine the various couple of rulebooks they come with, are between 20 and 40 pages of actual rules.
Yep, I would say so.
Yeah. You know, a lot of the more modern ones. Obviously, some games like Age of Sigmar are much less.
Sure.
Or have their rules in a lot of other places, but this is about what most of the modern games are aiming
so
for.
This is a very modern game. It's a very 2017 tabletop game that just happens to be set in World War II.
Right.
So I think that this game is going to be, compared to previous editions of Flames of War, this is going to be really approachable.
Absolutely.
And you're going to see a lot of new players being, you know, who may be interested in it. Who are going to, I mean, this is well, Flames of War is the biggest historical war game.
Absolutely.
I would say. And now the biggest historical war game is going to be the most approachable it's ever been. So
even though it's the smallest scale.
Exactly. Even at 15 millimeter.
Even at 15 millimeter, yeah.
In theory, there might be a 6 millimeter game out there somewhere.
Maybe.
I don't think so. Okay. So
I think the old versions of Flames of War had rules for how to run it at 6 millimeter.
So we will see. So we have our movement. That's from 40 to 49. So moving, 10 pages. Shooting, from 50 to 65. Okay, shooting's kind of complicated. It's 15 whole pages. How to use artillery, 4 pages. Assaults, 8 pages, and then some kind of minor cleanup.
Morale
and stuff is taking about 1 or 2 pages, and then you're into Armies of the World, which is an introduction to all the factions. You get special rules for the Germans and the British, which is what this book focuses on, is Germans and British. And then, you know, how you build armies. There are no actual units and army lists in this book at all, but it has, you know, a section on army building and how you build it.
And I would say one other thing about that, well, we'll see that later, but there are some changes there from older editions too.
You get 4 whole pages on missions and mission special rules. Then you get the actual missions themselves, about 4 more basically taking you through about a little under 10 pages, and that's it.
That's
and then you get all your basics on the back. So let's get started. Can you give you a quick flip through? You get your quick start rules right up the front. How movement works. Showing you where you look on. So these are the unit cards that Abe was talking about. Right. So we get, you know, where do you look on those cards? This is the basic, you know, anatomy of a card, and it's telling you, you know, they're using a Panzer III as an example, and just kind of showing you, you know, this is how you tell how fast it can move. This is how you can tell, you know, the different versions and weapons it has. And this is how you tell, you know, how much it costs and how you buy it.
Yeah, and cards. I mean, that's the most modern thing. Yeah, everyone's using unit cards these days.
Yeah, and then you have you know, armor values and how you know, how are you shooting? How are you making saves? I mean, this is basically, you know, this is kind of taking you through a turn.
Yeah.
In these first few pages, and you know, and that gets you all the way through. You know, there's a couple examples of assault, and then on to the history of World War II.
Yep.
And you know, it's World War II condensed in 10 pages. This has basically nothing to do
with the game itself.
With the game itself. So we're going to kind of flip. You know, it has, you know, really, you know, it covers all the war. You get really, really nice maps. We're just kind of.
They're obviously focusing a lot more on mid-war.
Right, because that is the. And then you get into the actual, what is this game and how do you play it? So you have all the basics. You have, you know, all the things you're going to need to play. You get, you know, your sample, all the pretty pictures, sample battles set up. We're getting definitions of different types of things. What are teams? What are tanks? What are infantry? What's the definition of a formation?
Right.
Moving on to this section, unit cards. There's a big section that gives you examples of different types of unit cards. We're not going to show you all of them. Here's 4 on this spread as an example. So we have guns, aircraft, and artillery. Abe will let you kind of...
Yeah, I mean, this is going to have your basic, and you can see some of the differences in that. Aircraft are obviously a little different. They just have kind of... But basically, you've got your save or your armor value, depending on whether you're armored or not. You've kind of got your motivation. This is your how good you are making morale. This is what you need to be hit on, it looks like. And then you've got your skill level that modifies various different things. And then again, your speed, your different types of speed, and your different weapons. So pretty basic, pretty everything you need to use the game. And then it also does give you up here, it'll have the type and then also some of the special rules that the unit has will be at the top. So everything you need to use the units on that card. And that's a big improvement. Makes it a lot easier to remember things.
Moving on, we're looking at basics of terrain. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of rules that tells you specifically what they all do and the rules for them. But here's, you get your basic spread. This is kind of one of those, glamour shop pages. You get, right. This is what your game is going to look like when you start playing. And Flames of War, because one of the advantages of 15 millimeter is that 15 millimeter. Yes, you don't have the level of detail on an individual basis compared to, say, the 28mm games, but your games seem vast and grand.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, if you've ever seen Flames of War at like a large tournament or nationals or something, they have the most beautiful tables, even just normal ones, not even their display tables. That a well-done Flames of War table is one of the best-looking games out there from any kind of perspective. Yeah,
I mean, 15 millimeter really lets you do things that just don't make sense in the type of sense that you get from 20 millimeter games. You really get entire companies of tanks, and there's like a town that has to an entire small village, maybe
that's dozens of buildings, right? 2 or 3,
right? Yeah. And you're fighting around it or through it, and the game. You will never fail to see lots of people coming up to watch games when you see Flames of War played. Lots of terrain rules, different examples. So we saw kind of a basic one. Here's a page spread on desert terrain. We're also getting Battlefront using these different theme ideas to show off a lot of. I mean, almost everything on these boards. These are terrain pieces that they sell.
Right.
So we're getting to see their terrain as well. There's their desert castle, and they have
got that over there,
and there are things of hills and little rivers and oasis, and yes, the basics. Here we go. The turn sequence. Abe, let's take us through.
So it's again, this is a one player takes their turn, the other player takes their turn game, which is one of the more old-fashioned things about it, funnily enough, even though it's still a tried and true method. So basically, you start. You have the starting step where things kind of get ready. Then you move, you shoot, you assault, and then that's the end, and then you end the turn. And that's a pretty basic, pretty standard, pretty familiar turn breakdown.
As an example, it is the in version 3 we had the order of a game turn was the starting step, followed by movement, followed by a shooting step, followed by assault. So while the game is substantially simplified, all of the core structure is still there. So this is in no way an alien
not at all
game to existing players.
And then each step itself is broken down into a number of smaller steps.
Yeah, so the starting step, remounting bailout tanks, rallying your units, check unit last stands, formation checks, victory conditions. I mean, this is basically, starting step is where you're doing all your record keeping.
Right.
And, you're resolving things and taking off tokens and making sure that things are happening. We're going to show you 1 or 2 pages of each of the major phases. We're not going to show you the entire thing. So movement, the movement sequence, here it all is. And we're getting to see basics. So, you're going to, obviously, what are you doing in the movement phase? You're going to be moving. Where do you look for? where do you look on the cards to see what your stats are. They give you examples of how you move, staying within a certain distance. If you're part of formations, you can't just have guys wander off wherever. And then of course things can be destroyed. So if your formation is broken up, what happens?
Right.
There's lots of other examples of movement and tons of really, really pretty pictures.
And even in this, you know, they managed to get a lot of granularity. They've simplified things, but that's not to say that things are completely simple. You know, a unit still has its normal tactical movement, and then how fast it moves through terrain or across country or on roads. You know, there still is a fair amount of variation. Units still have a lot of different options.
Right, but as an example, compared to previous editions of Flames of War, there used to be a rather large, like, cross-index chart.
Right,
because
exactly.
you know, it would be like there's, you know, the previous edition would say have more than half a dozen different types of vehicle. Are you wheeled? Are you half-tracked?
Yeah.
Are you tracked? Are you a motorcycle? And then there'd be, you know, another 8 different types of terrain, you know.
Look up,
So it's definitely nice to just say, look, you know, there's only so many different modes, speeds that a vehicle needs to be able to move at, that a unit needs to be able to move at. Let's just group them down to 4 and let's just put them on the card. So there's just no charts, you know, there's no looking stuff up, which is I'm all for that.
Absolutely.
You know, I think definitely, you know, in this day and age, I think gamers really like the concept of you bring your army to the tabletop, you have your deck of cards, it has everything you need, you put it down on the tabletop, and everything you need is there.
Right.
And
people don't want to reference a rule book anymore. And that was the old standard, was, well, let's go look in the rule book for every you know, time I did something.
Yeah, and
people don't want that anymore.
Yeah, and you would have to stop a game, you know, literally every you know, 5 minutes. And and now it's just keep it simple, keep it clean, put it on the cards, put it on the tabletop.
Yeah.
And then, you know, once or twice a game, this weird thing comes up.
Rule comes up.
You look it up, and that's cool. And I am all for that.
Absolutely.
I'm all for that. We're going to skip forward, and we're going to take a look at shooting. As you would assume, guess what happens in the shooting phase?
Things get shot.
I think you fire guns. I think
guns,
guns get fired in the shooting phase. We're going to show you the next page after this because we only get the one. So here's kind of the sequence of what happens. You're checking your range. You're seeing if you're in line of sight. Is your target in cover? You're going to declare who you're shooting at. You turn to face your target. You're rolling to hit. You're starting the hits, and then the bad guys get to roll their saves. You know, and then you go from there. Very, very similar, pretty much the same as what was in previous edition. And we'll go take a look at just these first 2 pages of shooting to give you an example. Abe, you want to?
Yeah, so again, it's going to go over your weapon characteristics over here, and those are kind of your weapon name, the range it's effective at, and then its rate of fire, which is how many shots it can shoot, and those are broken down versus your whether you're moving or stationary, and then you have you know, your amount of how good you are taking out tanks, or basically how good you are at taking out tanks, and then special rules, that kind of thing. So that's all, again, represented right on your card, and pretty easy to remember right there.
What else do we have here? We have just some basics of who can shoot,
what you can shoot at,
checking line of sight and range, whether you have line of sight or not. This is actually a really, really common thing here, which is nice. Is they have a minimum distance of 3/4 inches, which is what is necessary for you to be considered to have a shot. Because in historical games with tanks, it is classic. It comes up all the time. They'll be like, I can just barely through these 3 buildings. I can see like a sliver, and they're like, no, that's, you know. So they have it's nice and clear. Also, handily enough, the 3/4 inch distance that defines the minimum is a very common size for tape measures. Right. So I'm sure that's not a coincidence.
Not at all. Yeah. But again, you can kind of see that, like, yeah, over here they can see like the very tip top front of the tank, but you can't shoot at that. That's
right. So as an example, going back really, really quickly, so here's our 8 phases of the shooting sequence. Back in the previous edition of the game, there were 13 phases. Right. So they've dropped that. And this entire section of rules, this is the longest section of rules in the game. So all of shooting and artillery combined is 20 pages. In the previous book, it was well over 50. Yeah. It was 50 to 60 pages. So
So just kind of in general, again, they're chopping out a good half to 2/3 of the rules.
Yeah, all the little fiddly cases. Moving to artillery, it's kind of a you know, it's related to shooting. It is shooting, but it's kind of done in a very, very different mechanic.
Right.
And Abe, I'll let you kind of go through that.
Yeah, I mean, basically, you just have you need to have something that's spotting. Then you check the range. You select the aiming point. You rotate your artillery to face because there are still some fiddly things like making sure your artillery's facing the right direction. Then you roll to hit. Roll a range in first to see where your actual barrage lands. Then you roll to hit. You roll saves. You roll the pin down. You're still going to go ahead and use a template like you did before, and it's the same square box barrage artillery. So this, I think, I mean, this is again very familiar to if you played Flames of War before.
Yeah, exactly. You have your big giant. You know, you're firing in Flames of War. You're basically firing artillery in batteries.
Yep.
And then it's abstracted to where, as opposed to some other games where there's a big round area in Flames of War, it's a large square template.
Right.
So in the square is oriented to face the firing unit, and it just kind of hits, you know, it inflicts a number of hits on kind of everything that's under there.
Right.
You pick a spot, and then it drifts a little bit based on, you know, on a bunch of factors, and then, so, I mean, it's a pretty cool system. As we've said before, in the current edition, artillery, as an example, artillery takes up 6 pages.
Yeah.
And the phase itself, you have 8 different sub-phases. In the previous edition, artillery had 11 subphases from 8 and took up approximately 20 pages.
Right. So huge.
Huge simplification of artillery. We're going to move on to assaults.
Yep. And this is another very streamlined area. 7 steps. You go into assault. You do make defensive fire still. Then you roll hit. You make saves, and then you see if the assault's over or not. Basically, if the enemy doesn't run away, they can fight back, and then you can kind of continue doing that until people run away. 7 steps and about 8 pages, I believe.
8 pages, 7 steps, very clean.
Yeah.
Assault traditionally in Flames of War, Assault has been one of the fiddliest parts of it. It was very complicated. It took a lot of time to kind of understand what was going on, and there was a lot of tricks and kind of nuance.
Yeah.
It was one of the phases that really kind of separated casual players from the pro players.
Right.
And you know, same thing. As an example, 7 phases. Previously, 12 phases.
Right.
8 pages of rules. Previously, 25 pages of rules, so 3 times as large, with all kinds of crazy, fiddly corner cases that just aren't in here at all. Very quickly, before we reach the end of it, you get your kind of final 2 pages here on rules.
Morale, yeah.
On yeah, exactly. So we have morale and how to deal with last stands with both infantry and vehicles, and then we reach our factions.
Yeah.
So we are now dealing with this book, as we pointed out, emphasizes. It covers all the factions that fought in World War II, all of the nations, but the emphasis in this book is Germany and Great Britain.
Right. I mean, this is really the Africa book.
Correct.
In many ways.
Correct. And so we'll show you Germany as an example. You have Germany. You get their background. If this looks familiar, it's because you've seen this art before from previous books. We haven't looked at it specifically, but I would not surprise me if most of this background text is also there.
Yeah. Though I'll say, at least from 2nd edition, I'm not as familiar with 3rd edition. I know that the special rules are pretty different. They've done a lot of changes to special rules and stuff.
But a lot of the classics are there. Tiger Race is there. Stormtroopers are there.
Yeah.
The things that the faction that are the real hallmarks,
right, are definitely still there.
They're still there.
And these rules actually are going to change. We'll show you it soon, but they do change depending on what era you're playing in.
There's also rules for Great Britain that we won't show you, and then we'll flip through really briefly. The United States and Soviet Union are in here. They're in here. They don't actually have their rules in here. It's just a little introduction. Hey, these armies are here. You'll be able to play them. Japan is in here too.
That's the big,
very cool,
which is really big. That Japan has not been a focus of the game for a long time. It wasn't even in the first 2 editions at all.
So nice to see Japan get their fair shake in the core rulebook.
Right.
So that's really cool. That's really nice. At the towards the back of it, we have
generic special rules.
Yeah,
here.
we have 2 pages of just special rules that are used for various units. Can have these things handed out. It'll show up on their cards. So here they all are. Same thing. The special rules. I mean, that's all the special rules.
And it's great to see them all in one place.
In 2 pages. You get. There are no army lists in this book, but you do get how you actually build an army. So when you actually get when you pick what faction you want to play and you buy their army book, here's how you do it, and they tell you, this is how you, these are the rules. You're gonna, you have your core formations, and then there's support ones, and some of them are mandatory and you have to have in your army, and some of them are optional, and there's ratios, and everything is all there. So they give you an example of that. They give you an example, like there's a formation, here's an example of a unit, and then we'll skip past that and we will take you to the mission section. We have 6 different
missions,
normal missions. That's pretty much the standard these days for all the games out there, and how they work, how you're going to score them. There are no draws. Remember that. In World War II,
no draws.
No draws. Dun dun dun. And there's some mission special rules, and then we're just going to show you the first standard mission, which is Annihilation. You get your special rules, how you set up, deployment, how you win the game, a little bit of background on it. Pretty much, if you've played any tabletop war game, if you've played Flames of War before, every game's mission 1 is the same. I have some dudes, you have some dudes, they're going to set up across the table from each other.
Whoever's left wins.
Fight. And then it gets, more complicated from there. Ambushes and all kinds of weird conditions we're going to get. And then skipping all the way to the end, you get Phil Yates. He's the Flames of War designer. A page of notes from him and big fancy index. And then just as we saw in the previous edition, you get kind of the quick summary charts for everything on how it all works. So when you're playing your game, unless you're looking for something really fiddly, to be honest, between the cards you have on the table, probably you can play the game with that and this back page open, and you're probably in good shape. And that, in a nutshell, that's Flames of War.
Flames of War.
We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to briefly show you guys the early war and late war add-on books that are pretty much addendums to this, because this entire book and everything that's in it is obviously specifically designed for mid-war.
Right.
So we will be right back. Okay, we are back, and we are looking at the Flames of War version 4 early and mid-war, early and late war rulebook, and the special rules and warriors. And really, these are kind of transition books.
Transition books or translation guides almost.
Translation guides. We'll take a look at this guy in a little bit. Off he goes. And we'll take a look at this guy. So, Abe, what do we have in this book?
So this is going to be basically a version, an alternate version of the core rulebook. The first 60 pages of it are just the exact same, basically, rules. They're the core rules, and they're going to be the same core rules you find in the core rulebook.
It is softcover.
It is softcover. So. And this is basically the idea behind this and the other book. This is how you can convert your existing campaign books or intelligence briefings, intelligence handbooks for late war and early war into 4th edition.
Right.
So you've got your old 3rd edition books. You want to use them in the new 4th edition.
Because all the army lists are in there.
All the army lists are in there that haven't come out yet. This is how you would use it.
Right.
So it's going to have a lot of special rules, a lot of missions, a lot of how to convert stuff, both unit and army special rules, and how to convert those things into the modern Flames of War. As well as the complete, as you can see, up through page 4 to page 60, the actual rules.
Right, and these are identical. So we've seen these before. So the 40 pages of core rules that are in the main book, they're in this book also, and then you have all the extra pages over here of from page 65 to 75 of, as opposed to the 2 pages of special rules, you have 10 pages of special rules. This is where you do get U.S. special rules, German special rules, British and Soviet. So the United States and the Soviets now arrive.
I'm surprised there's no French special rules for early war.
And then we have 10 pages of fortifications.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
For this new game system, that's a lot of space. And then a whole bunch of missions.
Yep.
And a lot of different missions.
Yeah.
So we'll kind of go through it really quickly. As you can see, this is all
The same stuff we've already
Yep,
seen, really.
we've
Some
already
of the
covered
pictures
it.
are a little different now.
Yep.
They've taken out some of the mid-war pictures and put them in later early war pictures.
So we'll go take a look at terrain. This is the exact same spread
one, yeah.
that we already did. I'm going to go to movement really quick. You know, we're going to go through this part really, really quickly. Same thing. We're going to skip to the end of it because shooting and artillery will also be identical. And assault, I'm still going. There we go. There's last stand, special rules. And now we're on the special rules. And as we read special rules, as you can obviously tell, okay, now we got some different stuff here.
Right.
The kind of things that we didn't get in kind of the core, you know, that book had 2 pages of special rules. This book has 10 pages of special rules. It's got all kinds of weird stuff like how to place railroad tracks
for your armored trains
that you're going to have in early war, because armored trains are cool.
Oh, they're amazing. They're the best thing to come out of early war, obviously.
Maybe not the best. Okay.
French tanks are pretty cool.
Sure. We'll flip past that. So, you know, there's all the there's German armored trains, and then lots of special rules for, you know, just all kinds of little...
And some of these are the same special rules you found in the core rule book, plus a bunch of other ones that aren't out yet or are going to be obsoleted. You'll also see at the end of the special rules, these are rules that are no longer used. So there are some special rules that just no longer have any effect.
And they specifically tell you, like, you know, so, yeah. Limited vision, mobile rocket launcher, slow traverse, if you see those in any of your books, you can just...
ignore them.
You can ignore them. And those, and I said, there's a lot of these. We're going all the way to page, skipping way forward, minefields, booby traps, again, really, you know, gorgeous photography. And
go through all the army special rules are in there. They'll tell you which ones still count, which ones don't, how to adopt that.
You do get example. You get kind of the beauty of the game spreads that we didn't get a lot of in the core.
Yeah, definitely.
So getting kind of some of the campaign themes, and then examples on same thing. How do you build your army? How you build your army? How you actually pick a legal force, and then they give you some examples of like what a legal force looks like.
Right.
So here's a German legal force that is a Panzer Fusilier company, which is pretty cool. And then the entire last like 12 pages of this book, which is a lot for this book, is all the missions, and there's a ton of them, as opposed to the core rule book that had 6. You're getting about roughly 12, about twice as many in here, and that takes you, you know, and there's a lot more mission variety in early and late, and then that takes you all the way. So there's Bridgehead as an example, somewhat complicated, and then you have your index at the end, and you are good and buy all of our stuff.
Yeah. So this is all the books that you can convert over, obviously, and early and late war stuff, and these are the rules for how you would use them. You're not going to get any of the fluff, World War II background, that kind of stuff's all been cut out to make room for those conversions.
Exactly. This is dense 100% rules in this book. There's nothing else. Okay, so there's that guy. Now, I'm going to talk about this guy. There's this little kind of pamphlet book, and this is something that's similar. So this is early and late war special rules and warriors, and what this does is, as opposed to that was the rule book. That's how you actually play, you know, and missions and stuff. This book is kind of interesting. This book is specifically designed for all of the couple dozen intelligence briefings, which are the army books,
the army
Flames
books
of War.
and campaign books.
So all of the army books that they have made, this is basically the translation guide. So this basically tells you, hey, if you own this particular book, so and we're going to show you 2 or 3 of them. So if you own Blitzkrieg, you're going to turn to page 47, and from page 47 to 50, it's going to tell you, hey, for each of the 4 armies, these are the new faction rules that replace the ones that are in that book. So all your nation rules are updated, and then if there's any characters or individual warriors, this is how they work.
Right.
So exactly. This is kind of the quick, and this applies for this. So this little tiny book is this is for all of them.
Right.
That they've
broken
made
down by the book itself. How it affects.
Yeah. So as an example, we're going to go to. I'm going to turn really quickly over here. We're going to go take a look at one from. So we're going to go to the Eastern Front. We will start with Red Bear. So if you have Red Bear, which is the Soviet forces, this gives you you know, kind of a quick little, you know, for just the Soviet forces, you have, here's how the, you know, Strokovy battalion, these are the differences that exist within it. If you have an 8th Guard Rifle Company, you know, these types of teams pass skill tests on a 3. Right. So they're translating any of the weird little idiosyncratic rules.
And then they'll also tell you down here, these rules are no longer used.
And you get all of them. Here's a Polish Home Army. This is how, you know, things work in Romania and what. So there's an example of that. Let's go take a look really quickly at early war.
Blitzkrieg.
Take a look at the Blitzkrieg book. So this is the Germany rolling over Poland and France, and same thing. So here's Poland, and you get all of the updates to all their various companies and how their special rules work, and then you get their faction special rules. So these are the faction special rules that replace what's in that book. So if you play a Polish army, you throw all those faction special rules away because those work with the old edition. Here's the ones that work with the new edition. So there's an example of Blitzkrieg of early war.
And then also, well, quickly let's show.
Sure. You want to look at France?
Does it have the special characters in here?
I'm trying to find some. I haven't seen any so far, but I know that there's some.
I know there are some in here, but yeah, it does have France. It has all that after France.
Oh, right there.
Yeah.
So there's an
these
example.
are the special character warrior units, and these are the new rules for them.
Right. So there's Rommel in early war.
Right.
And these are his, right. So it's like, if he was in the old book, forget it. These are his new rules.
Yeah,
so you see.
Montgomery, kind of those things. Yeah.
And then we're going to really quickly go to show you something that is kind of cool, which is the Pacific Theater, because there is a Pacific Theater. Flames of War now. And so here's example of, here's the United States Marine Corps and Japan from the Banzai and Gung Ho books, and same thing. You get, here's all of theirs, you know, these are their special rules. These are their special rules for their tanks. That's what's no longer used. And then same thing here. You get the Marine Corps' special rules, and that is the back of it. So this is the translation book. So if you are an existing Flames of War player, you have a lot of these books already on your shelf, gotta have this.
You can use this until they get converted over.
Exactly. Yeah. And alrighty, so that is our introductory look at. Let's put them all here at Flames of War version 4, and this is from Battlefront, and it is available right now. Thanks for watching, guys.